For the next hour, we will take an amazing voyage from the gates of heaven to the flames of hell. Join us as we see through the eyes of those who have seen for themselves. From Thomas Edison to experts on the afterlife, we will take on the most incredible journey of them all, death and beyond.
In the wake of death, history lies as jumbled pieces of a fragmented puzzle. We're surrounded by different expressions of the individuals who have left this world, their accomplishments, their attempts, and their failures. Though their pursuits were different, we, like they, are drawn to one conclusion: death. I'm John Osteen. I speak with many people who are faced with death and dying. Death is a subject usually avoided, often feared, but is inevitably faced by all of us. To some, death is merely the doorway to the traditional concept of heaven or hell. To others, it's the bridge to reincarnation or a graduation to a higher plane. And still others feel that death is the end, the scientific termination of existence. To them, religion may serve only to inspire moral behavior or to comfort the anxiety often associated with death. Many are too busy to concern themselves with the subject. Sigmund Freud said at the bottom, no one believes in his own death. In the unconscious, every one of us is convinced of his own immortality. If you haven't given thought to your own death, it is approaching and deserves some consideration, not in morbid preoccupation, but in curiosity and awe of a natural phenomena as full of mystique now as when time began. In our technologically advanced society, we still are unable to determine what happens when we die. Yet according to a Gallup poll, 2/3 of the American population believe in a life existence beyond death. Is there anyone who can tell us what's out there? In exploring the end of life, we may learn new meaning for today. How can we prepare for death? Perhaps the experiences of others at deathbed could be helpful.
Thomas Edison, world-renowned inventor. In his lifetime, he patented over 1,000 inventions, many of them revolutionary. The electric lamp, the phonograph, and the microphone. A man whose first teacher said that he would never amount to anything has definitely left his mark on this age of technology.
Thomas?
In his later years, he continued to work long hours in his workshop in West Orange, New Jersey. On August 1st, 1931, Edison collapsed while working in his laboratory. He was bedridden at his home until the 14th of October when he slipped into a coma, but not before he uttered these final words.
Doctor, doctor.
What is it?
Looking up, he said, "It is very beautiful over there." To what exactly was Edison referring? Something he saw from a window? Recalling those words, "over there," Edison's doctor asked if perhaps in those final moments the great inventor had caught a glimpse of something beyond. His meaning, we can only speculate.
3 days after Edison's death, As a national tribute proclaimed by President Herbert Hoover, millions of Americans turned out their lights in honor of one of America's most brilliant minds. It's interesting to note the effect death has on those that still live. Death can seem to freeze a point in time, creating an indelible mark in history. For instance, most Americans vividly remember where they were when the news of John F. Kennedy's assassination was broadcast. The nation's heart froze in shock. Others, such as civil rights activists Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lennon of the Beatles, come to mind. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. William Shakespeare. Death is often the climax of the theater. Through classic tales such as Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare immortalized death. Scores of films, ballets, operas, and myths end in our hero taking a final tragic vow, leaving the survivors to mourn, to somehow go on without them. The idea of being alone after the death of a loved one is a common fear. Perhaps this fear is one of the reasons we form negative feelings towards death. How do we cope? Coping with death has been the focus of Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, author of the book on death and dying. She has devoted her life to comforting dying patients. She's written several books, given seminars, and developed educational programs to help humanity face death in a more positive way. Dr. Kubler-Ross has made some interesting observations. She stated, suddenly people realize all the things they treasure they can't take with them. They say to themselves, oh God, I've made a living, but I've never really lived. All of a sudden, priorities seem to change. How different will our life look when viewed from the deathbed perspective? What will be important? Kubler-Ross has this to say. When you talk to 20,000 not only dying adults but children, you realize that love is really the only essential thing in life. Not the kind of love we were raised with, but unconditional love. The only thing that helps you not be afraid of living or of dying. Unconditional love. It's an interesting remedy to the fear of dying. Experts like Dr. Kubler-Ross tell us that the most anxiety regarding death is in the process of dying and not in the moment of death itself. So what exactly happens at the point of death? What happens at the moment when time as we know it stops? Dr. Raymond Moody, the Associate Professor of Psychology at West Georgia College, has devoted his life's work to the study of the deathbed experience. He describes the following accounts in his bestseller, A Light Beyond.
Basically, what I have done is that over the past 25 years, I've been able to talk with over 3,000 individuals who returned from the brink of death and who had fascinating experiences to tell us about when they revived. A case I remember that was very interesting is of a woman who was being resuscitated after her lungs collapsed, and she underwent a cardiac arrest when she was recovering from gallbladder surgery.
Her Amos's is bright red.
Okay, what are her vitals? Check her pressure. And get some more people in here.
What can I do? You can notify the family and then get back in here.
Start an IV.
Yes, sir.
It was decided by the doctor that this woman was in all probability going to die. He informed the family, who lived very nearby. And a friend of the family who was taking care of this woman's young daughter rushed her to the hospital, but to dress her just happened to grab the first two items from the laundry pile, which happened to be mismatched plaids, and then took the daughter to the hospital.
Keep him close to the daughter.
Oh, yes, doctor. This is Mrs. Steele's daughter.
Hi. Everything's going to be okay.
Doctor, code in 437 again.
She was being resuscitated in one room, and the doctor and nurse had essentially given up on her, but were still making some effort.
Doctor, there is no pulse.
The woman who was being resuscitated found that neither the doctor nor the nurse were able to see or hear her,
Yes, doctor.
so she left the room entirely where her body was being resuscitated. In a waiting room in another part of the hospital, she saw her daughter in mismatched plaids, and she was very puzzled as to why this would be. She tried to ask her friend, why is my daughter wearing mismatched plaids? But of course the friend was unable to see or hear her. Later on, after she regained consciousness, she confronted the doctor with this. Why was my daughter wearing mismatched plaids?
What is it?
Who dressed my daughter?
What?
Who let her out of the house like that? She doesn't even match.
I made it perfectly clear no one was to come in until I got back.
Doctor, absolutely no one has been in this room, I promise. I don't understand.
Then I don't... How does she know?
On occasion, these patients are able to tell us things that were going on even outside of the rooms where their bodies were being resuscitated, and are able to give us very tantalizing corroborations that suggest that indeed they really were out of their bodies as they say they were. One woman related to me watching her body from above, and she tried to communicate with her doctor and nurse and asked them what was going on. She found that they weren't able to see or hear her. She left the room entirely, left her own physical body behind being resuscitated. And in a hallway outside of a waiting room, she happened to see her brother-in-law, who was assembled there with the rest of the family, waiting what they imagined to be the death of this woman.
Bob, how you doing? Hi, Tom. Everything all right?
No. I'm scheduled to fly out of here in an hour to close on a major account. It looks like Carol's getting ready to kick the bucket. I guess I'll have to stick around and be a pallbearer. Gee, that's too bad, Bob. I know. I could lose the entire account.
When she regained consciousness in the hospital and her brother-in-law came to visit her, she confronted him with this.
I heard you.
Heard me? What do you mean? Heard when?
Am I missing something here?
The next time I die, Bob, you just go on that business trip. I'll be just fine.
What do you mean? I didn't...
I'll gladly get another pallbearer.
What are you guys talking about?
Of course, many people, in talking about near-death experiences, want to go immediately to the explanation in supernatural terms that these experiences are what they purport to be, that they do seem to be visions of life after death. The difficulty with that is that life after death cannot be proven scientifically. I think that life after death is still something that has to be accepted pretty much on a kind of faith. And that the near-death experiences, as impressive as they are, don't really give us scientific evidence that we live after we die. However, the simple-minded scientific explanations that have been proposed also don't fit, in my opinion. These experiences are far more complex, a very different kind of phenomenon than the after effects of drugs or medications or even psychological factors. I think these experiences are not just wish fulfillment for reasons that are very complicated. These experiences change people's lives in a very positive way, unlike wish-fulfilling fantasies. I don't know what the ultimate explanation of them is. For now, I just go on accepting that I take these reports more or less at face value, that these people do get a glimpse of what's always been called the beyond or the life after death. That's not something that will ever be scientifically proved. It's just my subjective impression after talking with 3,000 people who've been through this.
Near-death experiences, are they fantasies or fabrications? Can we ignore the fact that these people have died and then were resuscitated bringing back to this world what they experienced beyond. Dr. Moody has familiarized the Western world with the concept of near-death experience. He did not discover this phenomena. There are similar accounts occurring in literature and art throughout history. The Ascension to the Empyrean, painted by Bosch in the 15th century, depicts 4 phases of the near-death experience as defined in Moody's book: floating out of the body, the journey through a tunnel, heading toward a bright light, accompanied by heavenly beings. Long before Bosch painted this piece, we read of similar accounts in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, dating AD 800. Some of the descriptions of the soul journeying after physical death are similar to those mentioned in near-death experiences. One of the oldest pieces of literature in the world is the Egyptian Book of the Dead, an extraordinary collection of prayers and spells for guiding into the next world, dating back to 2500 BC. No culture has been as firmly centered on belief in the afterlife than ancient Egypt. The ancient pharaohs were buried with provision of food, possessions, even their slaves buried alive to accompany their master to the next life. So we see this contemplation of afterlife is nothing new, nor are the experiences Moody has defined. He's given them a name: near-death experience. The response to Moody's work by the medical community has been hard to gauge. Many physicians do not want to be contaminated with spiritual matters. What prompted Moody's career of research of near-death experiences? He was a student in the University of Virginia. His professor told of a psychiatrist who had a most remarkable experience with death that had dramatically changed his life.
It was the 1st of December, 1943. Private George Ritchie was stationed at Camp Barkley, Texas. He had just been chosen to attend the Medical College of Virginia and was waiting to be sent to Richmond to begin classes. A week before he was to board the train, he checked into a hospital due to an upper respiratory infection. The day before his scheduled departure, he felt his condition worsening, but tried desperately to prove that his health was satisfactory. It was the last train out of Camp Barkley that week. Missing the train to Richmond would possibly mean missing the opportunity to attend medical school. Ritchie spent that entire night in coughing spasms with an uncontrollable fever. He was aware that his condition was severe. His fever was abnormally high. He had already been trained as a medical and surgical technician, so he was in a state of shock when he saw that the thermometer had reached over 106 degrees. The medical staff arrived to transport him by ambulance to have an updated chest x-ray done. Private Ritchie collapsed, and his condition deteriorated throughout the next 24 hours. Eventually, he was pronounced dead, his chart reading expired from double lobar pneumonia. Then the officer gave orders to prep him for the morgue. From there, George Ritchie tells of what he experienced during the time that he was pronounced dead.
From a subjective point of view, I'll have to tell you what I was experiencing. I knew I had missed my train. So I'm looking all around this rather dark room trying to find my uniform. Couldn't find it and decided that I didn't have any more time to waste that, so I come on out of this little room into the hall, and I'm crossing, getting ready to go outside when I see this ward boy coming down. I turned around to him to tell him to watch where he was going, and either he walked through me or I through him. Now this kind of shocked me, but when I hadn't made up my mind I was going to get to Richmond, I was going to get to Richmond, so this didn't shock me. I go on to the door, going to the outside. As soon as I got outside of that door, I'm suddenly up into the air, varying between 500 feet to 500 yards above the ground, going at an incredible speed. And finally I come to this large river. I see this city on the other side. I let down just in front of this white all-night cafe because I saw this civilian getting ready to go into the cafe, because I want to ask him if I'm heading in the right direction to get to Richmond.
What city is this? Excuse me, sir. You can just tell me what city this is? I'd really appreciate it. I was on my way to Richmond, and I seem to have gotten lost. Please.
This was the second time that another human being acted like they could neither hear nor see me. So I went over to lean against the guy wire of a telephone post, and my hand goes through the guy wire of the telephone post. Then it suddenly hit me that I had left something back there in that bed in Berkeley, and I knew, because I was still using massive denial, that I'd better go back and get it. And I made the next, or the first most important discovery about being outside of your body. That you really go where your soul sincere desires. That time and space as you and I comprehended in this level doesn't exist, because in no time at all, I was right back there in front of the hospital. But I had made a very tragic mistake. I hadn't looked to see which ward I'd come out of, much less which room. I could see the soldiers lying there in the bed. And we take for granted we know what we look like, but we don't, because you see, we really have never seen ourselves from here up, except in the two-dimensional object we know as a mirror. And I saw a lot of soldiers that looked like me, but none of them had my fraternity ring on the finger. And I'm going through from ward to ward, room to room, trying to find me, and becoming more desperate. Finally went into this little isolation room, and lying over in the bed with the sheet pulled up over its head was this body. I realized it was me because I recognized my fraternity ring, and it even had a chip on the black onyx because it was a Phi Gamma fraternity ring, and there wasn't any mistaking. And I am utterly petrified. My massive denial has broken down. I suddenly realize that that body is dead. And I'm too young to die. I'm only 20 years of age. And then all of a sudden I thought the light at the head end of the room was getting brighter, but it was growing in an intensity of light to where if you turned on 1,000,000 welders' lights, you'd have some idea of the intensity. Three things happened at the exact same moment. Something deep inside of my spiritual being, not the corpse lying over in the bed, said, stand up, you're in the presence of the Son of God. At that exact same instant, out of this brilliant light stepped the most amazing being I have ever met. And those hospital walls virtually disappeared. I saw every single minute detail of my life, everything I had ever done in public, in private, from seeing my own cesarean section birth through my 20th year when I was pronounced dead. And he threw a question, what had I done with my life? And I thought, well, I'm an Eagle Scout. Immediately he shot back, that glorified you. And the same question again, what have you done with your life? Now over there in that realm, there is no such thing as hypocrisy, because one of the first things that you become aware of is that the other being is totally aware of what you think, so you can't think one thing and say another. There's no such thing as misunderstanding what he meant. And yet, here was a being that knew everything about me, and he totally accepted me and he totally loved me. Now that blew my mind. The next thing that took place was that the Christ motioned for me to come over close to him. Now you can well imagine by this time I really do think that I've seen everything, but I'm finding out this is just the beginning, because suddenly he's opening up another realm to me. Now I wanted to stay there, but then I suddenly realized that the Christ was pulling me away and that we were heading back into this isolated room in Camp Barclay Station Hospital outside of Abilene, Texas.
Private George Ritchie's death was confirmed by Dr. Donald G. Francie, captain in charge during the time of these events. Dr. Ritchie's book, My Life After Dying, contains the elaborate account of the various realms of the afterlife that he claims to have experienced. It is a detailed look at one man's encounter with death and what he believes lies beyond.
According to Gallup, 16% of polled scientists believe in a life after death. This is a severe contrast to the 67% of the general public who say life after death is fact. But what if none of the proposed medical or scientific explanations for the near-death experience can fully account for it? Dr. Michael B. Sabin began his research of these experiences as a skeptic. Recollections of Death, a medical investigation, was Dr. Sabin's scientific quest to explore near-death experiences. His final conclusion, revealing the hesitancy of science to fully account for the whole of the human experience. Dr. Sabin goes on to quote Albert Einstein, "Everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifesting the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of man, and one in the face of which we, with our modest powers, must feel humble." Medical technology is ever increasing the human lifespan. Death is considered the enemy. But when it comes to the definition of life, some patients and physicians are leaving medical advancements behind and making a decision for themselves. According to Gallup polls, merely existing on machine-generated body functions is not enough of a purpose for some to continue living. Is death an option? When? And who decides this? Many complex questions are raised, and scientific explanations seem to provide only part of an answer. Religion without science is blind. Science without religion is lame. Albert Einstein. Both science and religion seek for ultimate truth, but search for it in opposing ways. At least it appears that way. The many religions of the world present their own version of the afterlife and how to get to paradise. Images suggesting heaven are easily seen in the numerous accounts of each death experience. A place of indescribable beauty, feelings of peace and overwhelming love, angels, a being of light, perhaps God. But what about the counterpart to heaven? What about hell? The eternal place of torment? There's some sort of hell mentioned in nearly every major religion of the world. A place of punishment beyond the grave reserved for evildoers. Dr. Moody claims that a hellish death experience is extremely rare. Does this loosen religion's hold on mankind? Or is the research incomplete? Dr. Maurice Rawlins has found that there are as many hellish experiences as pleasant ones. Unlike most researchers in this field, Dr. Rawlins has been present during the death and resuscitation, seeing firsthand what the patient experienced. It was during one such incident that Dr. Rawlins dealt with both science and religion, the body and spirit, heaven and hell.
I became interested in afterlife experiences when I ran across a hell case. I was testing a patient with chest pain to see whether it was heart origin or not. So we hook him up to the treadmill, the EKG, while he's racing on the treadmill to get the heart rate up to levels that will exacerbate the pain, bring it on, and we'll record it while he's having the pain. If the EKG goes haywire, that's heart every time. But contrary to the average patient, this fellow drops dead while we're exercising. Everybody knew their job. The nurse started ambu bag in mouth to mouth to start breathing. His heart had stopped, his breathing had stopped. Now he's doing the external heart massage. But he was dead, and he unfortunately had a heart block. I'd reach for instruments and his eyes would roll up. He'd sputter, turn blue, stop breathing, heart stopped beating again. I'd start him up again. Half the people would come back and let you try it on. Sudden deaths. He'd convulse a little bit. He'd say, "Doctor, I'm in hell." That's nice. Don't bother me with it. I'm a doctor. "Doctor, you don't understand." And then I'd let go and his eyes would roll out. Up into his head, it'd sputter, turn blue, stop beating again, and the nurses look at me and say, "You better do something." The dying man's wish, what would you do? He said, "Doctor, pray for me. Keep me out of hell. Do something. Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Say it." And he would say it. And please forgive my sins. Keep me out of hell. And if I die, I want to go to heaven. Repeat it. He would repeat it. But if I live, I'm on the hook. I'm yours forever. He had a conversion experience from this make-believe prayer. Right on the floor. Instead of writhing hair on end, dilated pupils, fighting us off, get them off of me. Instead of that, he's peaceful, like an ordinary dying patient.
Regardless of the nature of their experience, each individual was radically changed. Research shows that they have become better people because of their experience. They return craving increased knowledge and a strong sense of the importance of love. Moody goes on to propose that this change is evidence that the near-death experience is more than just a crisis event. It seems to demand that a person take some positive action with his life, rather than leaving him emotionally stuck, unable to put traumatic events behind him. Rollins says the one thread of commonality in case studies of afterlife experiences is a changed life. He doesn't consider it a valid afterlife experience unless family and friends of the patients agree that there has been a change.
The story of Kenneth Hagin's near-death experience is spectacular. In April of 1933, Hagin was bedridden. He had been ill with a deformed heart from birth. On the evening of the 22nd, he took a turn for the worse. His family stayed by his side and waited for the arrival of the doctor. Suddenly, a pain shot through his heart like lightning. He was convinced he was living his last few moments. He states, "My toes seemed to go numb. This numbness spread to my feet, my ankles, my knees, my hips, my stomach, my heart, and I leaped out of my body. I knew I was outside of my body. I could see my family in the room, but I couldn't contact them." As he tried to communicate with his family members, he felt himself leaving the room and falling into what seemed to be a downward well or cavern. Hagin claims that as he descended, he could see the lights of Earth fading away and was eventually covered by darkness. When he came to the bottom of the cavern, he was surrounded by giant orange flames. He saw what he believed to have been the gates of hell. He says he was physically drawn to those gates like a magnet, though he tried to stop himself. I was conscious of the fact that some kind of creature met me at the bottom of that pit. I didn't look at it. My gaze was riveted on the gates. As the creature grabbed Hagin, a thunderous voice spoke. The creature immediately released Hagin, and he felt himself pulled towards the light.
Granny.
Oh, son, you're back.
Granny, I'm going again.
No. Hang on.
Where's Mom? I want to tell her goodbye.
When I thought your Mama, you were gone, she ran out the door.
I've got to tell Mama goodbye.
Yes. Lily.
Granny, don't leave me.
No.
I'm afraid I'll go with you.
No, I won't. I'll stay right here, son. I'll be right with you.
Granny, I'm going again. I love you.
Hagin states this event occurred 3 times. The third time, he thought he may have been hallucinating the entire experience. But as the darkness surrounded him, he was convinced that this hellish place was real. Hagin tells of calling out into the darkness. "God, I belong to the church. I've been baptized in water." Once again, he was at the bottom of the pit, faced with the gates and the unknown creature. But again, just like the 2 times before, he heard the voice. I don't know what he said, but whatever he said, that place shook. It just trembled. Hagin remembers praying as he ascended towards Earth. "Oh God, I come to you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. I ask you to forgive me of my sins. I want you to know it was like a 2-ton weight lifted off my chest." Dr. Kenneth Hagin eventually recovered from his heart condition. He is known internationally as the founder and president of Rhema Bible School.
Does a hell await beyond the grave? Where is it? Are the flames real or figurative? Who goes to hell? According to some religions, your destiny is a mystery until death. Is there anything we can do about what lies beyond death? Or are we powerless to when it strikes and where it takes us? Is there any escape? There is a death experience that stands out among the countless others, perhaps the most documented. This man controlled his own death. He told how he would die, and that he would make contact from beyond the grave. Of course, people were skeptical, even his closest friends. But just as he predicted, he died. A few days later, the man was seen. That same day, he appeared to a room full of others. The man, Jesus Christ.
Jesus was crucified on Friday, but the preparation for his burial had to be put off until after the Sabbath. Early then on Sunday morning, 2 women came to the tomb. and were surprised, astounded by the presence of an angel. There they discovered a man dressed in white whom they recognized as Jesus. Falling to the ground, they worshipped him as their Lord, and he instructed them to go and tell his disciples what they had seen. Interestingly, all of the narrative traditions, all of the stories and episodes related to Jesus' death, burial, the empty tomb, and his resurrection appearances center first around women. This is an extraordinary reality given what we know about women in the first century world. Today we understand that women and men are equal. We treat them often as equals. We take the word of a woman as we would a man. But that's not the case in many places in the Middle East today, and it certainly wasn't the case in the first century. In other words, if the early Christians were going to manufacture an account of Jesus' resurrection, they wouldn't choose to foreground women as the first witnesses, because those testimonies would not be taken as seriously as those given by men. The disciples were gathered in an upper room. It's easy to understand that they were sad and disoriented. They were leaderless and hopeless. They were also afraid. Rome had a way of dealing with groups like theirs that caused trouble. Rome would round up the leader and kill him, and then round up all of the disciples, all of the followers, and do away with them as well.
Mary saw what you wanted to see. Fairy tales. All of it. Enough is enough.
Who locked the door after Cleopas? Relax. And leave Mary alone. She's one of us.
Only reason she was welcome here was because of Jesus. He's gone now. Why couldn't she have seen him? He did all kinds of miracles. We saw them with our very own eyes.
What about Lazarus? He raised him from the dead. Why not himself?
It's over. We were wrong. He was a good man. Good men die too. Just like we will.
The despair, discouragement, the depression of those early disciples after Jesus' death is easy to believe. They had very few interpretive tools to work with in order to make sense of Jesus' death or the testimony of the empty tomb. When Jesus would have spoken of the resurrection, they would have thought that he would be speaking like any Pharisee or other Jew in the first century. He would have been speaking of the resurrection of all people, represented in Daniel chapter 12, the resurrection of everyone at the end of the age. There was no expectation that one person might be raised from the dead. Jesus is picking up where he had left off in all of his ministry as he sat at the table with his disciples and shared fellowship with them. In spite of their running away at his arrest, their denying him, he forgave them and brought them back into fellowship. He reestablished fellowship with them by eating with them. And during the meal, he commissioned them to service, challenging them to carry on his ministry and telling them that he would be with them always to the very end of the age.
Because you have seen me, you have believed. But blessed are those who have not seen me and will believe.
It is at the point of death that a resurrection, not a religious belief, is vital. We have explored death and beyond. In many cases, people experiencing death have encountered a powerful light that loved them in an indescribable way. Others tell of a hellish experience, reversed in an instant by calling on God. The issue of God seems to be outside the boundaries of science, and religion may not have all the answers. Religion has always been man's way to understand and define God, but what is God's way to man? God is described in the Scriptures as a being of both incredible light and unconditional love. The Bible states that God loved the world so much that he sent his Son to restore mankind's broken relationship with him. Relationship, not religion, is the important thing. Jesus stands alone in the assured claims he made concerning death. In essence, he said, I have conquered death, and there is nothing for you to fear. Death, we may not like it, but we don't have to fear it. We must only receive the love and forgiveness that God offers us through Jesus Christ's victory over death. Then we will live forever with our Creator. Everyone dies. You will die. What lies beyond death for you?